welcome back to Cheyenne Reads, or welcome to Cheyenne Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up video. I read 8 books this month, well, not this month, last month, and I guess I'll start out with the only book that I read physically, which was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. This is my first time reading anything by her and completing a book. I really love this book. I fell in love with all of the characters, including Selena, but basically if you didn't know what this book is about, it's about an assassin named Selena Sardothian, and she's like Ardalin's best assassin, and she was only like 17 at the time, and she was sent to a death camp that she survived for 1 year, and people normally don't survive that long, much less a month. And so anyways, the Prince of Ardalin decides that he wants her to become his champion, which is basically his personal assassin, or the king's personal assassin. And she goes through this competition with like 30 other people in order to win the competition to become the champion. And if she doesn't, then she goes back to the death camp, which ultimately means she wouldn't survive. So I really enjoyed this book. It was a 4 to 5 stars because some parts were a little slow, but I am continuing on with the series. I'll be reading Crown of Midnight. I have it right here with Charlie from Snow and Books, so just keep a lookout on that because I'm reading this month. Anyways, next book I read this month for the DCG Readathon, if you were keeping up, I read A Sky Beyond the Storm, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. It was so amazing. If you don't know, I talk about An Ember in the Ashes so much, so I'm not going to really go into details, but the main characters, Laia and Elias, are pretty important to the book, and Helene as well, as the series goes on. And basically A Sky Beyond the Storm was the conclusion. If you want to know more about that, check out my past reading vlogs from December. Yeah. The next book I read was No Exit by Taylor Adams. Actually, I do have that book. So it's not the only book. I read this physically as well. That's crazy. I forgot I had this book. But basically it's a story about a girl who is on her way home from college because her mother has cancer. And while she's going home, she stops at a rest stop because there's a blizzard, and she knows a little girl in the back of someone's car in a cage, and she has to figure out who's the kidnapper and save the little girl. And this is a thriller, and it was amazing. I give it 5 out of 5 stars, and it did make it into my top 7 of 2020 books because it was just that good. And I read it in basically 1.5 sittings. Just amazing, honestly. The next book that I read that month, or I don't even know if this is in order, but I read The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. It was another book that made it into my top 2020. If honestly, thinking about it, it probably was my favorite book of 2020 that wasn't a series because it was just so phenomenal. It was about this little girl named Lenny who started at the book 13, moves to Alaska with her father, who is a war veteran from the Vietnam War, I believe, and he has severe PTSD, and his mom Cora is with him despite all that comes with someone with PTSD who's extremely violent. And this book should have trigger warnings for many things like abuse and things like that, so I would beware before going into this book. But I did give it a 5 out of 5 stars because I feel like it was so well executed. I loved the writing, and I loved everything about Lenny. I did not like the father, or I did not like him, and I barely liked Cora either, the mom. But what I did really enjoy was Lenny's story and how Lenny survived like a dark time in her life. So it was a 5 out of 5 star read. The next book that I read was, well, I started this book at the beginning of the month for Kirsten's Favorites. Kirsten from Kirsten's Corner. I read a few of her favorites. Check out that video if you want. It's one of my first videos in December. I read With the Fire on High in that video, and I vlogged it as well if you want to check that out. But the book was about this girl who had a baby and was like working her way through high school, trying to decide if she wanted to go to college. I believe I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, it was good, but I feel like I would have liked it if I was still in high school. And I also read Heartstopper Volume 2 in that vlog, which was really nice read. It was about this boy named Charlie who falls in love with someone else, another boy, and we embark on their love story, and it was so sweet. There was a lot of things like coming out in the book and finding your first love, and it was just so special and really close to my heart. It was just like a warm read. Next book that I read this month was The Deep by River Solomon for the DCG Readathon. It was such an amazing book. It was kind of slow at some parts, which is why I only rated it like 4 stars, but I really enjoyed the premise of like mermaids who hold information for their whole generation of mermaids, and basically they store every mermaid's memory in the book, and only one person can store it at a time, and then they release the information on like once a year, but chaos ensues, and somehow there's like a love interest in the book, and I just really enjoyed it. But it wasn't necessarily my favorite, but it was something I'm glad I read. It was such a good story, and I started to enjoy it at the second half of the book. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was probably a 3-star, but I give it a 4 just because I enjoyed the second part so much. So wild and so crazy. Like reading this story, Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson, I was really sad, and I kind of read it all in one day because I was doing a 24-hour readathon with some friends, and I just couldn't believe the fact I know in the music industry that people like music producers and people, or even celebrities themselves, like groom younger women in general. And just reading about a story where a younger woman was groomed by an older man when she wasn't even 18 yet, and he was much older than her, like in his late 20s. Just reading a story, listening to the audiobook really impacted me, and I was like genuinely sad, but I was glad that I was being informed about something that really does happen, and I would recommend it to anyone who can withstand like the trigger warnings or like aren't affected by them. So I would beware, like look up all the trigger warnings for that book, because it was pretty sad and it was pretty severe, because it wasn't just one woman in the book, it was multiple. If you'd like to see more videos from me, just subscribe, like this video, leave a comment down below.